I'm Eric Stark, joined with Ed Groover, our beat writer for LL League football for the Intelligence Journal and New Era. Ed, you got to talk about there was several big games last week. We'll start with the biggest, Manhattan Central traveling to Calico. We're going to look back, and some of these look backs are going to sort of preview what's coming up this week as well. First of all, you wrote from our Denver bureau office, correct? Tell me how that went.
Dustin Leeds home in Denver. Yeah,
nice.
He was nice enough to let me write from his house, so that worked out pretty well.
Nice. This is a game that I thought was going to be closer. 24-13 final, but it was not the game of the century like everybody thought. Central seemed to come out of the blocks quick, and Cocalico seemed to take themselves a little bit of time to get up to speed. But in the first half, I think there was a couple plays that may have made a difference. What do you see as some of the differences?
Two of the things that you mentioned, Central did come out quick. They set a tone on the first series when they drove entirely on the ground to a first touchdown. And then on their next series, one-play score. So they're
Slant
up.
Pass, boom, gone.
They're up 14-0 quickly. Cocalico acknowledged later that Central came out extremely fast, ready to play. And Central's line play, I think, on both sides of the ball was impressive. Right from the start, they set a tempo and maintained that tempo throughout the game.
Yeah, I talked to the Blue Ridge Cable sideline reporter, and she said she noticed at the very beginning of the year that Manhattan Central looked bigger. Something happened over the summer. These guys did more lifting. And you could see that in play. You looked at Cocalico's players versus Central. Central had some guys that really looked, and what I saw was that muscle played a factor as way they shed the blocks, shed the blockers and threw them aside. It didn't let Cocalico get into it. But Cocalico was on their heels early on. They started running their offense, and maybe you'll see it differently. I thought there was two critical plays by officials that in the first half maybe helped to stifle momentum or shift momentum or at least keep Cocalico from getting back in this thing.
Yeah, there were two critical calls by officials. Both went against Cocalico. The first was a pass interference call that I think most people in the stadium thought was going to be against Manheim Central.
Yeah.
Went against Cocalico, helped Central keep a drive alive. They got a field goal out of it. And then the next call, a bigger call, was Jet Janis' long touchdown run, weaving through Central's defense.
Right.
Had the crowd on his feet. Would have been a huge momentum boost for Cocalico at that point. Called back because of a hold. So that's a 10-point swing between those two plays. That you take a 24-12 game, now all of a sudden you're looking at maybe a 21-20 game.
Early in the second half, I was on the Central sideline for that part of it, and some of the Central players just turned after one of the first times they stopped Cocalico after halftime and said, it got quiet in here, didn't it? And it was really interesting because you're saying the crowd was into it after that touchdown, they got called back, and the bands are into it. It was a fun atmosphere, and all of a sudden you just felt like the air went out of the balloon in the second half of this game. Let's jump ahead to some of the other games here. We'll stay sort of Central related. They play LS. Both teams come in undefeated in the section, so it's, again, a section on the line right now.
Yeah, and side note to this game is that Central is going for the 500th win in program history. After they broke the team huddle last week, they chanted 499. So obviously this is something that's on their minds. But more importantly for them, of course, is the section lead. They're 3-0, LS is 3-0. Whoever wins this game, will win this section.
It's going to be up in the line. Last week, Anvil Cleona, 0-5 on the year, upsets Garden Spot, which, again, was a team that everybody thought was still in the section hunt here. This was a huge loss for them. Talk a little bit about that game.
AC's record are a little misleading. As I noted in my preview a week ago, they had lost, 4 of the previous losses had been by 6 points or less.
Okay.
But, all that said, I don't think anyone outside of Anvil Cleona expected them to beat Garden Spot. Huge upset for Garden Spot. They needed to win to keep pace with Donegal. Hope at some point Donegal would stub its toe and have a chance to tie for the section. I think this pretty much takes them out of it now.
We're not really dwelling on Donegal here, but they're talking about being on a roll since beating Garden Spot. Some big wins against Columbia and Elko last week. Even the scores since Tremblay came back.
Tremblay has been huge for them.
They're on a roll.
Right.
Catholic beat, Lancaster Catholic's on a roll right now as well, speaking of rolls. They beat Warwick last week. I think it was a pretty good matchup here. And this sets up a very good game against Wilson this weekend. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and last year's game between Catholic and Wilson at Catholic, coaches who have viewed that film have told me that it was one of the hardest hitting games that they have seen in years. It's basically a slugfest. And I think when you have two teams, as big and strong and physical as these two teams are, you can probably pretty much expect the same again this week. Catholic on a roll, as you mentioned, have won 3 straight. And turnaround started again, with Evan Purvis coming back to play quarterback.
Somebody said to me, "That's his it seems odd because that's not his natural position." They won last year with him there.
Mm-hmm.
They're winning here now. I'm like, it is his natural position. Put him there, but you see it a little bit differently, don't you?
Yeah, well, he was a wideout, to begin with. Was moved to quarterback last year, and again, their offense was run heavy last year with Roman Clay.
Sure.
Yeah, they thought that with C.J. Gantz coming in to play quarterback, they could move Purvis back to wide out and basically strengthen 2 positions. Didn't work out. Evan is back at quarterback now, and like Catholic coach Bruce Harbacher said, if we had him at quarterback from the start, they could be 5-1 now, maybe.
Interesting. He understands the position really well. Elko, Northern Lebanon, is outside the county, but still part of the LL League, and it's big for what reason?
It's big because both teams need this win to keep pace with Donegal.
And Northern Lebanon plays Donegal week 9.
Right.
So good matchups there. Anything else stand out you want to bring up here? Anything else you can get in your notebook or get in your stories?
I think one interesting thing about the Elko Northern Lebanon game is that a lot of playmakers on both sides. You look at the Section 3 top receivers, 4 top receivers come from these 2 teams.
Wow.
So I think you can expect pretty much of a shootout, I would think, Friday night.